Okay, today we'll be looking at post-judgment interest. Post-judgment interest. Uh, we are going to look at what is post-judgment interest. Where does the court derive the power to grant post-judgment interest? And is the power absolute or discretionary? Again, we also look at how to plead post-judgment interest. These are the things that we're going to look at in post-judgment interest so that we appreciate this particular claim, especially that usually appear in debt recovery proceedings. Now, post-judgment interest simply means that interest that the court attach to the principal sum or the judgment sum, which starts counting from the day the judgment is delivered. In other words, the interest that counts on the judgment sum from the day the court delivers its judgment. That is post-judgment interest. And now, again, is this post-judgment interest absolute? Where does the court derive the power to grant post-judgment interest? And at what rate can the court grant? At what interest rate can the court award post-judgment interest? We have to look at the rules of the courts for us to determine this. In Order 23, Rule 5 of the Federal High Court Civil Procedure Rules, the rules specifically stated that it must be at the rate of 10%. So if you are claiming post-judgment interest, you must limit it at 10% if your matter is at the Federal High Court. The Order 35, Rule 4 of the High Court Procedure Rules of Cross River State stated 10% too, that post-judgment interest should be 10%. In other words, if you are claiming post-judgment interest, you should limit it to 10% interest rate. It cannot be more than that, but it can be below. If it's below, you are the one losing. So, but the High Court Rules of Anambra State 2019, Order 36, Rule 4, stated that post-judgment interest can be 10% or at the prevailing interest rate fixed by the commercial bank at the time at the mature time the judgment is delivered. So there is a kind of improvement in Order 36, Rule 4 of the High Court Procedure Rules of Anambra State. So which states that it can be 10% or it gives alternative or at the prevailing interest rate at the time the judgment was delivered. So that is what post-judgment interest means and the power the court has to grant post-judgment interest. So how do you plead post-judgment interest? Post-judgment interest, in fact, the rationale behind post-judgment interest simply means that whosoever that has a judgment in his favor should be paid the judgment sum immediately. So if the judgment debtor returns the judgment sum without paying the judgment debt, it means that money will be that the judgment creditor will be at loss if that money is not paid to him. In other words, there is some economic value attached to the money. The money he could have used to do business or he could have used to earn profits, but still tied in the hands of the judgment debtor is a big loss to the judgment creditor. So the courts award that post-judgment interest against the judgment debtor in order for the judgment creditor to have benefits in the judgment sum. And again, the post-judgment interest has a kind of a motivation, a kind of a pressure on the judgment creditor and the judgment debtor to pay the debt. Because if the judgment debtor knows that interest is accruing on his part, if he fails to pay the judgment debt, he'll be forced to pay the judgment debt to the judgment creditor. So that is the rationale behind the post-judgment interest. So we have to know how to plead it. Pleading post-judgment interest, you have to state these facts that, the court will grant this post-judgment interest looking at the fact that look at the fact that the judgment or the defendant may not be willing to pay the money immediately the judgment is awarded in favor of the claimant. So these are some of the facts that you need to plead in order for you to succeed in post-judgment interest. You have to plead some facts and also state the rules providing for that post-judgment interest. Now, this was examined in the case of there is a case law on this post-judgment interest, Josco AG Global Resources Limited and another against Amcon. It's a 2018 Court of Appeal decision. Josco AG Global Resources Limited and another against Amcon, 2018 Court of Appeal decision, where the court analyzed the post-judgment interest and said that this post-judgment interest is at the discretion of the court. It is not mandatory, it's not absolute, it's not must that the court will grant it. But based on the facts you have pleaded, is what that is your facts, or the facts you have pleaded are what that will sway the court to grant it or refuse it. In other words, and the court in granting, in exercising its discretionary power, must exercise judicially and judiciously. In other words, if you have stated facts that should sway the court to grant it, the court is bound to exercise that discretion in your favor and grant it. Where the court does otherwise, it can appeal and challenge that exercise of the discretion of the trial court. So it becomes very important that we know how to plead post-judgment interest and the rationale, everything about post-judgment interest. When I first did some matters and claim, there were some matters I did before and claimed post-judgment interest, and the court refused to grant it. I didn't know much about this before then. So I would have appealed it if I have pleaded those facts that should sway the mind of the court to grant it. But I didn't know about it, so I didn't appeal it. So post-judgment interest is a means through which you can earn a lot of money. Assuming you are claiming a sum of 100 million, and you did not claim post-judgment interest, you are at loss. You check the 10% of 100 million, what it takes. That's almost 10 million in a year. So it is to the credit of your client if you played it, and even to the lawyer who plays it, because it will, based on the agreement you have with your client, it will add to the professional fee or the money you're going to earn from the judgment sum. So the post-judgment interest is very important for us to know more about it. So if you want to know, subscribe to cjokoyeloveyou.com, www.cjokoyeloveyou.com, and search for post-judgment interest in our latest judgments, and they are going to see it there. So follow up. Whatever we post in our platform, WhatsApp platform, follow up. Just read and take notes of this. Read and take notes. I still make my notes. Whatever I post on WhatsApp platform, I make my notes on them, keep record on them, so that I can be able to make reference to them and trace them whenever the need arises. So thank you very much.